Hello, my name is Jackie Owen, and this is my final tutoring portfolio. So, the little girl I worked with, I'm going to use a fake name for her. Her name was Jane. She's 8 years old. She's actually turning 9 on May 13th, so that's pretty cool. And one day I asked her what her favorite sport was, and she said that she liked to play archery. I found that really interesting because, I was expecting her to say, oh, I like to dance or I like to play soccer. I don't know, something that a normal 8-year-old little girl would say. So I thought her playing archery was really unique and interesting. Her favorite color is pink, and almost every single time that we had a tutoring session together, she was wearing pink. Super little, cute little girl. Um, she attends Emmanuel Lutheran Elementary School, and she has 3 brothers and 1 sister. So that's a little background on Jane. Moving into the reading assessments, for session 1 and 2, we worked on the QRI. I had her reading at a level 3 for her age. One of the stories that is on the screen right now, we read A Special Birthday for Rosa. Before we had her read, though, I asked her a couple concept questions, and she answered them, fine, but they kind of lacked imagination. They were really 1 or 2 word responses, and that's really common with her, as I learned throughout the tutoring sessions. She also read about 89 words correct per minute, which I was pretty happy about. When I asked her questions at the end, she recalls 7 out of 11 main events correct, but only recalled 13 out of 44 total events. So her comprehension is kind of off when it comes to that. For the third session, also another reading at Diderot. We took turns reading the story about huskies. She got really bored of the reading, I think, because it was more informational. It wasn't very to her liking, I guess you could say. But she did kind of like how there was a couple pictures, so that helped out. Also, when she was answering my questions at the end of the story, she also had very little imagination with her answers, and when I asked her to give me a couple definitions of some words, she struggled with them, so I gave her my own definition of the words, and her definitions were very similar to mine. And she also got 50% correct of the fact versus opinions. Sorry about that. For session 5, we read the story Genevieve Jones is a beauty shop guy. She told me that she had read the book before, so she read it at a faster rate. And by this time, I noticed that when she doesn't know a word, she gets really quiet, and usually, she skips over it and tries to see if I'll notice or not. So I've been really working on, if she can't pronounce a word, to use her finger and just sounds it out with each phoneme at a time, and that started to work really well for her. So that's just a picture of the book. I think it just looks funny, and it really catches children's attention because it just looks so goofy. For session 6, also another reading, we did Doll Hospital. Jane really enjoyed the story, and she finished the first chapter in about 15 minutes. I was really glad that she did that, and she was able to answer 4 out of 5 of my questions correct. This is kind of the comprehension part of it. So before we read the story, I told her to look at the front of the book without the title and tell me what she thought the book would be about. She told me it'd be about a doll. There's also a cat in the picture, and a girl holding the doll, giving it to another girl, and she thought maybe they would be sisters. So it's pretty simplistic. Those are the answers to her questions. As you can see, she doesn't really give a lot of detail when giving her answers to questions. For session 7, this was my favorite session. We read a story called Giddy Grandma, kind of has to do with the Berenstain Bears, and the reason this one worked so well is because she picked this book. I let her pick her own book this week, and from then on, I ended up letting her pick her own books because it worked really well. She answered 5 out of my 5 questions correctly. And this book I really liked because it was like perfect for her reading level. Like, she didn't really have to skip over any words. She knew how to pronounce pretty much all of the words. So I had her do the same thing, the comprehension. I asked her what she thought the book would be about. Obviously, you can see a grandma who looks really weird. She told me a grandma, and then the questions, I asked questions like, who are all the characters, and she was able to tell me all of the characters this time, which I thought was really cool. And she gave me really good definitions for some of the words I asked her to define. So that was really cool. For section 8, the final one, for reading, we read Sideways Stories from Wayside School. She really enjoyed this book as well. The cover of it is like this mean-looking teacher holding an apple and all these students in the background. And at this point, I realized that Jane does really well when there's humor in the books. She doesn't do very well when it comes to informative style books, which is very similar to me. I don't do very well when it's just informative, but if there's humor behind it, then I'll be more willing to read it at a faster pace. And she's also able to answer all of my questions correctly on that as well. So this is the comprehension behind it. She knew from just looking at the book that'd be about a teacher. She looked really mad or angry, and she could answer all of my questions correctly. So moving on to course concepts. The three ones that course concepts that I picked were the three that I noticed the most, that were repetitive with Jane. So for comprehension, I noticed that she can read stories pretty quickly, but she has a hard time comprehending what she just read. Her answers are very simplistic, usually 1-2 word answers, and it really takes her a long time to answer the questions. I usually have to reword the questions many times for her to try to understand what I'm asking of her. Another thing that she kind of struggled with was naming all of the characters in the stories. Like I mentioned earlier, she can't always name all the events that have happened in the story. Another course concept that we worked on a lot was writing, obviously. In the beginning, her spelling wasn't the greatest. I mean, it's not terrible for her age, but I would have liked to see better. Some things that she lacked was doing, double consonant, like carries. She spelled carries with only one R, and I would have liked to see that being more correct. Her writing also, it lacked a lot of imagination, which I found really shocking because I worked with another student and he was very imaginative and always was willing to write and write and write. And so when it came to Jane, I was just kind of like, come on, like, write a little bit more, please. Her sentences, one time I asked her to write about cats because she told me she had a cat at home. So I'm thinking, oh great, she's going to know all this stuff about cats. Well, she wrote down, I like cats play, and like one other sentence, so it wasn't very full of imagination like I would have liked to see. And then moving on to fluency, this honestly depends a lot on the book that she's reading. Like I mentioned before, if there was humor involved, she read at a faster pace, but if it was more informative, she'd read it at a slower pace. Also, when she would start reading kind of slow and then get a little bit faster and then kind of slow down at the end. Also, when she came across a word that she didn't know how to pronunciate or something like that, then her fluency would just stop. So I wish that wouldn't have happened, but it did. So let's talk about her progress. Throughout the sessions, I think Jane finally understood what I was asking of her. In the beginning, I had to reword my sentences or my questions a lot for her to understand what I was asking of her, but by the end of the time, she kind of picked up, we're going to do this reading, but before we do the reading, I'm going to ask you some questions about it, then we're going to do the reading, and then I'm going to ask you more questions and ask you to define and do a write-up, and then she kind of understood how the day was going to go for that. Another thing that she worked really well with by the end of the time is using her finger for helping her learn to read. Like I mentioned earlier, she wasn't always the greatest, when she didn't know how to pronounce a word, she would just skip over it, and I would encourage her a lot, to ask me before skipping over it, or to use her finger to sound out each word, and she ended up doing that by the end of the session, or the last session, and that was really cool to see. By the end, she also answered her questions longer in length, so, she would write like a sentence down, which would be like 3 words, but then I would really push her and be like, come on, I know you can write more. And another thing that really worked was asking her the questions before doing the other activities, so then that way she wouldn't see everyone else is done, so I should be done, so I'm just going to hurry up and do this quick. I would do those first and then move on to the other activities. Some concluding remarks. Jane, like I said, is a really awesome little girl. She, I think, has a long way to go for, comprehension, fluency, writing, whatever, but she's kind of a shy girl, so it kind of makes sense that she's all those things. One thing that I loved with Jane is that she would always want to give up with things. So I guess it can be kind of a struggle and kind of a love. She'd always want to give up with things, especially with the writing. But if I helped her with it, she ended up doing a really good job on it. So it was just that struggle of me, keep pushing her and keep pushing her. But then at the end, she would end up, doing a really good job on it. Something that I would change would be in a more secluded area. I know that we were in the classroom, so there's limited, environments that I could be in. However, if she would see a child that's done next to her, she'd be like, okay, I'm done. And I'd be like, no, you're not done. Like, we have to keep going. So that's one thing that I would really change. But overall, I had a lot of fun with Jane. And yeah, it's pretty fun.